I just found out my wife of 10 years cheated on me with my best friend and is now trying to claim half of our $750, $0 estate, even though she was subject to a prenuptial agreement and the affair was her idea. How do I fight her in court when she's already hidden $200, $0 in offshore accounts? I never thought I'd be the guy to find out my wife, Lisa, was cheating on me after 10 years of marriage. Honestly, I thought we had a pretty good thing going. We weren't perfect, sure, but I never suspected anything like this. The thing is, it all started with small signs, little things that didn't quite add up. She became more secretive with her phone, started taking calls in the bathroom, and she suddenly had a new friend at work, a guy named Mark. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured they were just colleagues. But then things got weird. It was about 2 weeks ago when I first noticed her acting strange around me. She was distant, distracted, and she kept brushing off my questions about her day. She'd say she was busy with work or she had a headache, but her behavior just didn't sit right. I also noticed her phone was always on silent, and she'd hide it whenever I came into the room. I didn't want to be paranoid, but I could feel something was off. That night, I decided to check her messages. I knew I probably shouldn't, but curiosity got the better of me. I snuck into her phone while she was asleep, and what I found was like a punch to the gut. There were messages between her and Mark, full of flirtatious talk, plans to meet up, and even explicit talks about how much they wanted to have sex. It was all there, clear as day. The messages made it painfully obvious that they'd been cheating on me for months. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My wife, the woman I trusted, was betraying me with my best friend. The shock hit me hard and I felt my stomach turn. I didn't know what to do at first. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, but I knew I needed to think. I didn't want to blow up the whole thing without a plan, but I also couldn't keep this secret anymore. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. How could she do this to me? After everything we'd built, after all the years of marriage, she just threw it away for some guy she met at work. I was angry at her, but I was also hurt. I started to question everything: our marriage, her loyalty, my own judgment. I never thought I'd be the guy to discover his wife cheating, especially not with my best friend. That's when I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I needed to prepare myself for what was coming next. The next day, I couldn't keep it bottled up. I knew I had to confront Lisa, but I also knew I couldn't do it without a plan. I spent the night tossing and turning, going over every detail in my head. I needed to get her to admit it, or at least slip up. I also had to figure out how much she knew I'd found out. She's a smart woman, but she's also pretty bitchy when she's cornered, and I knew she'd try to lie her way out of it. That morning, I decided to bait her a little. I casually brought up how I'd been suspicious lately, and I asked her if there was anyone she wanted to talk about. She looked at me with that fake innocent smile, trying to pretend she didn't know what I was hinting at. She everything said I was imagining things and that I was paranoid, but I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes. It was enough for me to push a little more. I told her I knew about Mark. Her face immediately twisted into this angry, defensive expression. "You've got no proof," she snapped. "You're just paranoid as usual. Maybe you're the one cheating on me, huh?" That was the moment I realized she was trying to turn it around, make me feel guilty, or even question my own fidelity. I stayed calm, but inside I was seething. I pulled out my phone and showed her the messages I'd found the night before. Her face went pale, and she stammered for a second, then started lying about how it was all a misunderstanding. "You don't understand," she said, voice trembling. "It's not what it looks like. Mark and I were just friends. I do know what you're talking about." She kept insisting she was innocent, that she had no idea how those messages got there, that it was all a mistake, but I knew better. I'd seen the explicit talk, the plans to meet up for sex, the way she'd been sneaking around. I felt a mixture of anger and heartbreak. That's when I realized she was lying badly. She's good at lying, I'll give her that, but I also knew she'd say anything to keep her secret. I kept my cool, though. I told her I'd be doing some investigating and I left the room. I needed to get my head straight. I started digging into her phone, her bank accounts, her emails. I already suspected she'd hidden money. She's always been sneaky about finances. Turns out, she'd hidden about $200, $0 in offshore accounts. I found the bank statements, the transfer records. That's when I really started to feel the full weight of her betrayal. She's been planning her escape financially while pretending everything's fine. My mind raced. I was furious but also strategic. I knew I had to get legal advice, especially with the estate involved. We've got a $750, $0 estate. And she's already trying to claim half of it, even though we had a prenuptial agreement. She's also trying to claim half of everything, even though she was the one cheating. I couldn't let her get away with it. I was planning my next move, gathering evidence, talking to a lawyer, figuring out how to protect my assets. I wasn't about to let her walk away with a dime more than she deserved, especially after what she did. That night I sat alone in my study, staring at the documents and trying to process everything. The betrayal hit hard, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I realized I needed to fight for what's mine, and I needed to do it smart. Lisa may have thought she could manipulate her way out of this mess, but I was determined to hold my ground. The next steps would be crucial. I was already planning my strategy, and I knew this fight was just beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind of planning and gathering evidence. I contacted a lawyer who specialized in divorce and asset protection. I needed someone sharp, someone who could help me navigate the legal minefield, especially with her hiding money in offshore accounts. The lawyer, a guy named David, listened carefully as I explained everything. I told him about the affair, the offshore accounts, her attempt to claim half the estate, and her outright lies. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "We've got a solid case, but we need concrete proof of the offshore accounts and her financial manipulations. If she's already hidden that much money, she's probably got more tucked away somewhere." I knew he was right. I started digging into her financial records. It was not easy. She'd gone to great lengths to cover her tracks, but I found a few clues. She transferred money into accounts in the islands, the Bahamas, even some small European banks. I traced the transfers and got hold of some wire transfer receipts. It was clear she was planning to start a new life, maybe even leave the country if she could. I was furious, but I also felt a strange sense of resolve. This wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about protecting what was mine. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up her act. She tried to play the innocent wife, crying that I was overreacting, that I was jealous and paranoid. She accused me of trying to ruin her, of being controlling. She even said I was the one cheating, probably with someone from work, she claimed. It was all so predictable. I knew her game now. She was trying to confuse me, to distract from her lies, but I didn't fall for it. I knew the truth, and I had the evidence to back it up. One evening, she confronted me in the living room. She looked angry, defensive. "You're ruining everything, you know that. I never wanted it to come to this. I love you, but I also need to be happy." I looked at her and said, "You lied to me for months. You cheated on me with Mark, and you've been hiding money to start a new life. I won't let you do that. I'm going to fight for my rights, and I'm going to make sure you don't walk away with a dime more than you're entitled to." She scoffed, rolled her eyes, and told me I was overreacting. That's when I realized she was already planning her escape. I decided I had to act fast. I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer to file for divorce. I also obtained a court order to freeze her offshore accounts and any assets she transferred. It was clear she was trying to hide everything, but I was going to catch her. I wanted her to know she couldn't manipulate her way out of this. I also started talking to a private investigator just to get some visual proof of her activities, meeting Mark, transferring money, whatever I could find. I needed to be thorough. The emotional toll was heavy. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. For years, I'd been blind to her manipulations. Now I saw her for what she really was, a selfish, deceitful woman who only cared about herself. I knew I'd be okay, but it was hard to accept how deeply I'd been hurt. I kept thinking about the good years, the plans we made, the trust I had in her. But that trust was shattered. Still, I knew I had to stay strong for myself and for whatever future I had left. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. The legal process moved faster than I expected once I had all my evidence together. My lawyer, David, filed the divorce papers, citing infidelity and financial misconduct. We also got a court order to freeze her offshore accounts and any assets that could be hidden. I knew she was panicking. She started making frantic calls, trying to spin her lies, claiming she was innocent, that I was just jealous and paranoid. She even accused me of cheating, which made me laugh. I knew her game now. One afternoon, I decided to confront her directly. I wanted her to see I wasn't backing down. I called her into the study, laid out everything I'd found, and told her I had enough proof to take her to court and strip her of any claim to the estate. Her face twisted into a mix of rage and panic. She tried to deny everything again, but I cut her off. I told her I knew about the $200, $0 she'd hidden offshore, and I had the wire transfer receipts to prove it. That made her go silent for a moment. Then she snapped, "You're just trying to ruin me. I deserve half of everything because of what you did." I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "You think you can cheat on me and hide money, then come back and claim half? Not happening. You're not getting anything except what the law says you're entitled to, and I plan to fight for every penny. And trust me, I've got enough evidence to make sure you don't get away with this." She screamed at me, calling me a bastard and a cheater, but I was already numb to her words. I knew I had her cornered. As the days went on, I kept building my case. I hired a forensic accountant to trace every dollar she'd transferred and to estimate what she'd hidden in offshore accounts. Meanwhile, I also hired a private investigator to follow her around. The Pie caught her meeting Mark again at a hotel downtown, sneaking out late at night. I got pictures, clear evidence that she was still cheating, even while claiming she was innocent. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how deeply she'd planned her escape. Emotionally, I was a wreck. I'd loved Lisa once, or at least I thought I did, but now I couldn't recognize her. She was cold, manipulative, and willing to destroy everything we had for her own selfish needs. I felt betrayed not just by her, but by myself for not seeing it sooner. Every memory, every shared moment now felt tainted. I was angry, yes, but also disappointed. I thought I knew her. Turns out I didn't know her at all. One night she came to the house drunk, crying and begging me to forgive her, saying she was sorry and that she'd change. I told her it was too late, that trust was broken beyond repair. I told her she'd ruined everything and her only option was to accept the consequences. That was the moment I decided I wasn't going to be the fool she thought I was. I was going to fight her in court, expose her lies, and make sure she paid for what she did. I wasn't just fighting for the money. I was fighting for my dignity, for my sanity, and for the truth. The betrayal had cut deep, but I was determined to come out of this stronger. The court date was set about a month after I filed for divorce, but I knew the real battle was just beginning. Lisa was doing everything she could to drag it out, trying to delay, making false accusations, and claiming she was the real victim. She showed up at the hearing looking haggard, a little more frantic than before. Her lawyer tried to argue that she deserved half of everything because she'd been a good wife, despite the mountain of evidence I presented. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. When the judge asked about the offshore accounts and the hidden money, I handed over the forensic accountant's report and the wire transfer receipts. I also had the pictures from the private investigator, showing her meeting Mark late at night. The judge looked at the evidence carefully, then addressed Lisa directly. "Your actions have been thoroughly documented, including attempts to hide assets and infidelity. This court will not reward dishonesty or betrayal." Her face turned red and she started protesting, but the judge silenced her. In the end, the court ruled that her offshore accounts and hidden assets would be part of the division. The judge also confirmed that, given her infidelity, she wouldn't be entitled to half of the estate, only what she was legally owed. That was a huge relief. I knew I'd get most of what I'd worked for and I could finally start moving forward, but the fight wasn't over yet. I still had to settle the financial matters, and Lisa was determined to fight me every step of the way. After the hearing, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I'd fought hard and I'd won some semblance of justice, but the emotional toll lingered. I kept replaying everything, her lies, her betrayal, the time I wasted trusting her. I realized how I'd ignored the warning signs for far too long. I'd been naive, thinking love and loyalty were enough. Now I knew better. Trust is a fragile thing, and once broken, it's almost impossible to repair. I also learned a lot about myself during this ordeal. I learned I was stronger than I thought, capable of facing betrayal and fighting for what's right. I learned that sometimes, people you love will turn out to be the very ones who hurt you most. Most importantly, I learned that I needed to prioritize my own well-being and protect what's mine. The estate, my peace of mind, and my future, those are the things I now fight for. I'm not sure what's next for me, but I know one thing. I won't let her take more than she's entitled to, and I'll never let her manipulate me again. The scars are there, but I'm healing, and I'm finally ready to move on. In the aftermath of everything, I've had time to reflect on what this entire ordeal has taught me. Honestly, it's been a brutal wake-up call. I thought I knew Lisa, thought I could trust her with my life, my money, my heart. Turns out I was blind to her true nature. The woman I loved turned out to be someone I barely recognized, someone willing to lie, cheat, and betray everything we built for her own selfish gain. It's a bitter pill, but I had to face it. The truth is, she never cared about us. She only cared about herself. Getting through the legal battles was exhausting, but it also showed me how important it is to be vigilant, especially when it comes to money and trust. I learned to be more cautious, to dig deeper, and never to ignore those gut feelings. If I'd paid more attention earlier, maybe I could have avoided the heartbreak. But it's also made me realize that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it feels impossible. Standing up for myself, exposing her lies, and protecting what's mine gave me a sense of closure I desperately needed. Now I'm rebuilding my life piece by piece. I've started therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I've focused on my career and my kids. They're the real reason I keep going, my anchor in a sea of chaos. I've also cut all ties with Lisa. No more calls, no more visits, no more pretending that this is just a rough patch. I've accepted that some relationships are beyond repair, and that's okay. It's better to walk away with dignity than to stay and be dragged down by lies. Looking back, I realize I was naive for so long. I trusted her because I loved her, but love isn't enough when someone is fundamentally dishonest. I hope anyone reading this takes away that lesson. Always protect yourself, always check the facts, and never ignore the red flags. People can surprise you, sometimes in the worst way, but you have to be strong enough to face the truth no matter how painful it is. As for me, I'm finally at peace with what happened. I know I did everything I could, and I refuse to be a victim of her games. I've learned that betrayal cuts deep, but it also teaches you resilience. I'm moving forward now with a clearer mind and a stronger heart. I'll never forget what's happened, but I won't let it define me either. I'm ready for whatever comes next, better, wiser, and more cautious. And honestly, that's the best kind of revenge.